Because when the police psychologist showed up, like this is real. Life's fucking real, man. Like, like real things happen. People are dealing with real stuff.
I battled anxiety for most of my life, and
I'm really fucking good in the pressure situation, man. Like, I don't know if I want to do this. Like, well, you're doing it.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shellda Podcast. My name is Dan Shelley, a professional paintball photographer. And in this episode, I sit down with the legend, the voice of paintball, Matty Marshall. And we jumped right into topics going from vulnerability. Matty talked about a traumatic event in his life that really changed the course of his life, how he went through his whole entire life of really having crippling anxiety and having to overcome that. So we went really deep in this podcast, and this is one that you're definitely not going to want to miss. So let's jump right into it.
Photographer of the year, let's hear it for Dan Shelley, Shellda Photos.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Shellda Podcast. And today I am joined by just an absolute legend in the game, a previous professional athlete, an inaugural Hall of Icon, Hall of Famer, complete legend. Now has transitioned to what is known as the voice of paintball, which we'll dive into later. Matty Marshall, welcome to the show.
How you doing, bro? I'm saw some of your early episodes. I'm glad you've gotten into the storytelling field. You're an absolute natural at it with a very smooth voice. So I'm just glad you're in this field because you're crushing it.
I appreciate that. And that actually means a lot coming from you because I think it was last year on the Spick and Span show, you read the children's book that I wrote. Mm-hmm. And that was, for me, was like, wow, hearing your voice as a natural. So that compliment means the world to me.
No, and I'm not just saying it because I'm on your show. You do, as soon as we offline, when I first, clicked the check into the link button, and you were like, good afternoon, sir. And I was just like, wow, Dan's got a really smooth voice.
Yeah, somebody, I don't know, one of the earlier episodes, somebody left a comment like, you should do like paintball voiceovers and like put me to sleep at night. So maybe I'll do some like paintball bedtime stories eventually.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I read your paintball bedtime story to my son on a regular basis. So because when it first came out, I remember you sent me a copy, and I really appreciated that. My son loves paintball. I mean, he's 4.5 now, so he can say paintball. But when we first got the book, he couldn't actually pronounce paintball, so we just called it the pew pew. So he'd be like, Dad, can we read the pew pew book? And I'd be like, you want to hear about Cooper's adventures and with Uncle Ryan and Uncle Alex and Uncle Oliver, Uncle Yosh? And he's like, yeah, Uncle Ryan's team. And I was like, oh man, don't say that in front of those other three.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's been like such a cool journey, going to all the NXL events. I've just had random pros walk up to me and be like, your book has helped connect what they do to their family. Like a recent one that comes to mind is Daniel Camp. He came up and he was just over the moon because he was like, now I can relate what I do to my son. And like they even had it with them right there and they were reading it. So hopefully it helps build that generational gap and get some younger players into the sport that will maybe eventually be a professional. That's the hope of it.
The power of story is a real thing. And that it doesn't matter how old you are or where you're from or what language you speak. We're human beings and our brains are all constructed the same way. So you can't overestimate the power of story. I think it was Steve Jobs that said, the most important person in the world is a storyteller. And when you notice how Apple built their products, like, they made badass products. And there's a famous guy named Simon Sinek. If anyone, after you watch this, go check out any of his stuff on YouTube. But he gave this TED Talk probably 15 years ago. I think it's called Why Great Leaders Inspire. And he talks about how, Apple doesn't say, check out this phone we made. It's such and such powerful and it has this many gig. No, they say, we made a device that not only will change your life, it will change the world. Mm-hmm. Do you want to buy a phone? Notice the story that I'm kind of telling you there. I'm telling you about a device that will change, your life and the world. And it's all that's in 2 sentences. It's incredibly powerful. So it's just messaging is crucial and very important. I think about that all the time.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for saying that, because I think that's one of the topics that we're going to dive into here eventually is storytelling and the importance of that and why paintball really needs that. But before we get too far into this, I do want to give a huge shout out to my 2 show sponsors. BFP Gear has been with me since day one. And I know Gina and Junior Brown from way back when.
Saw them the other day, yeah. And their daughter, Shelby, who I almost didn't even recognize, actually didn't. They have a 16-year-old daughter. And, it's Rich's daughter. Anyway, so it's just one of those things. I sat down next to her. She was playing with my kid, and I was like, man, this woman looks really familiar. But anyway. So yes, I go way back with Gina and Junior, and yes, and that family for sure. And I'm just big fans. So
yeah, it's been so cool to have them on board. Like since day one, they supported the show, and it feels like every week I get like a little care package, and they just hooked me up with all of my like microfibers for the season. They have BFP gear, SAC paintball, and extreme paintball all over them. So I fly through these things. So I'm so appreciative to have them on. And then secondly, hormesis. I've got, this is, you'll know from the Pew Pew book, this is the headband that Cooper wears, the Inner Dragon. And this is my personal headband that I've been wearing since that book came out. And it's just, I never leave home without this. If I miss something, or if I forget my goggles or a jersey, like I don't care about that. But like if I forget this at home, forget it, I'm turning around. So it's cool to have hormesis on board. So yeah, let's jump into it. We've got the NXL season coming up, and that's usually when players are starting to get their mind right for the season. There's a lot of preparation from spending hours studying layouts on and off the field. With you now being on the broadcast side of it, I want to start off and know, how do you prepare for these events?
Well, it's a lot of work. And I've mentioned this in different shows before. I actually have him here because I did a show yesterday with Mike Jeffrey, kind of breaking down the schedule and the brackets and kind of going into some of the narratives. But the foundation for me is detail, narrative and detail. So there's two different versions of that. Not to necessarily bore everybody, but so I have these sheets that I keep. They're marred with coffee stains or rain stains or paint stains from the events. And essentially, because over time I've had to develop a system, because it's inherently difficult where we are essentially wrapping a show around a pre-existing event instead of vice versa, which is typically how it's done.
Yeah.
Which is problematic. So for instance, we'll go live at 7:20 a.m. in Tampa next week, then we're live until basically 5:20, and that's if everything runs on schedule. Sometimes we'll have as little as, sometimes we'll get a 10-minute, it goes quick, and sometimes we'll have a 3-minute break because, that schedule has to go. So I've had to, over time, figure out a process to condense a lot of information into a small amount. And so I figured out a way to kind of put, just on one sheet of paper, what everyone's done so far for the season as far as placing. So I basically put the team, their overall series points, their win-loss record from the last event, who they played, each game, their plus minuses, and overall scores for and against. So I kind of, my wife calls them my tweaker notes. And then people are like, hey, I could put, when they'll come up and see them, they're like, dude, I could put that on a spreadsheet for you. I'm like, no, what? No, this is my system. Yeah, I have spreadsheets too. I bring my computer up and I have access to the rosters and I have my other notes and sponsor reads and all these different things. But as long as this paper is solvent, then, and also it's cues to my mind at just the fact of handwriting it down, it forces me to take a moment, triple check it as I'm putting that metric in, and then have think about it a little bit as I'm creating these things. And then, just other notes as well too, kind of went through the schedule and, just did like a little, I don't know if you can kind of see that, the glare is bad, but essentially it's like, the schedule and then the records for the teams that played against each other last year. And then, kind of have some more notes over here with like a plus minus, kind of this a little similar thing, but condensed on another. I have another sheet with, and a lot of my day to day is spent, talking to players and teams and kind of seeing how practice go, who's, and there's a lot of stuff that I'll know, because I don't break news, I tell stories. And I'm really happy actually that over time the narrative ecosystem has evolved, and so that there are people that are looking for that juicy, gossipy type news breaking thing. Yeah. But I have to keep the confidence of these people, and I've had to do that for a long time. So I'll know a lot about things that are potentially in the works, but I have to talk to these teams and players with respect to their stories, because I need to get the story right. I'm not in the business of being the TMZ of paintball. I consider myself more of a historian. and a storyteller of the game. So getting that story right is more important to me than the clicks that are going to come from just kind of, putting up some, I hear Mouse is on the move again. It's like, no, I mean, I'll call Mouse or talk to Mouse and be like, and then we'll have a conversation about it, or talk to his buddy, or, the owner of the team or whatever. So, and the run up, now that we're just a week away, it's already started, have these different conversations, text message threads with some guys, just having intricate conversations. Who's looking good? How's so-and-so? Is so-and-so still dealing with that real life thing? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes. So I just try to get a real good feel for, again, the metrics and the narrative.
Wow.
And so it just takes a lot of time. Watch a lot of paintball too. So I will go through and watch the games and take notes, move for move, blow for blow, gunfight for gunfight, which helps me when we go and create content, because then I have an accessible database that I created myself that has both metrics and narrative in it, so that when I go and have to sit there and ponder, like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to tell this story? Then those are my resource materials to access different variations of that.
Wow. I would almost say you are preparing more than some of the athletes do with the amount of time you're spending before events putting into this. That's wild.
Well, the greatest compliment that I ever get is when I go to events and people are like, "Oh, Matty, you got the greatest job in the world." And I do love my job, but then they'll bookend that with like, "Yeah, dude, you just show up at the events and talk about paintball, and that's all you got to do." And I'm like, I do love my job, but son, that is not how it works.
Yeah. We hear that all the time. We'll call you and I as media. Like, people think I just take pictures and I post them on Instagram. My job's done. Like, there's so many hours behind the scenes that people just don't understand. Right. And it's that famous iceberg image where, like, you just see the tip of it and it has the success, but underwater, it's all the other workings of how big this monster is. Yeah. And you're having to, as one person, having to wear the hat of like an Adam Schefter, having to wear the hat of breaking news, confirming that story, and then also telling a live show for 10, 12 hours a day. Like, that alone is crazy.
Yeah, it's because I don't know, that's.
Hey, podcast fam, I just want to interrupt super quick and say thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Shellda Podcast. Going on this journey has been an absolute dream come true, and I've got so many big plans for this podcast for the rest of this year. And in order to hit some of those goals, I need your help. Nearly 45% of you aren't still subscribed to my YouTube channel. So the quick, easy, and free way to show your support for this podcast is take a moment, hit that subscribe button below. Lets me know that you enjoy the content, that you're enjoying what you're seeing, and then I can keep growing the podcast. All right, let's get back to the interview.
It's I don't know, it's a different type. There's so many different ways to discuss this, but it's like that famous phrase for musicians, it takes 10 years to make an overnight success. But it just takes a lot of work to be perceived, because this is the space for these types of conversations, but when people log in and they start watching paintball, they don't give a shit about any of that, and they shouldn't. That's fine. It's more like, the world needs something from everybody. The world needs things from you. The world needs things from, that's just how I look at the world. You have to give things to the world, and it takes work to create those things, whatever that thing may be. And so when I look at the work required to bring these things to life, so that when I sit in that seat and the buttons are hit and we go live to the paintball world, then I'm doing my due diligence to make sure that story is told properly, and I'm human. I'm going to make mistakes, and I'll have an off day here or there, off game, but it's just, I at least I can sleep a little better knowing that I did my due diligence to make sure that, I try to know the stories. And it's a lot, there's 10 or 20 pro teams. There's about 200 pro players. They go in and out. So, and I don't really have staff. It's not like I got a bunch of interns and, we're just rolling in dough over here. So I'm like, hey, you boy, get over here, intern, go do this, call this person, find this out for me. Like, I got to figure all that shit out on my own for the most part. So, but yeah, so, and then the actual kind of grind is tough, dude. It's really tough to, it's, I would say that it's like, I would tell people, they're like, what's it like? And I'm like, well, what on planet Earth are you the biggest expert in for you? Like, what do you know the most about? Like, I don't know, is it guitar? Is it whatever, the business that you run, or whatever it is your thing, your Wu-Tang Clan, like history, like what is it, like what are you that you would consider yourself something the most about, whatever it may be. All right, now I'm going to give you an audience. I'm going to hit play. I'm going to hit the button. We're going to go live. And I need you to talk nonstop about it for like 10 to 12 hours. Now, there are things that are happening out there, obviously, so I get to speak to the action, which is kind of part of what we're doing. But you have to thread narrative into the action to, again, give a story of context to people so they have a reason to give it shit, and that's one of the things I've said many times. I'm going to continue to repeat it. It's just so true. Like, no one wakes up in the morning and just all of a sudden just starts caring about things. That's not how the human mind is created. The human mind is not created to just magically get up in the morning and care about your podcast or our sport. Like that's not how we work. You have to be intrigued in a way. You have to see something. Someone has to tell you about something. It opens up a little door. You go through the door, go down that rabbit hole. And once you start going down the rabbit hole, there has to be some juicy bits of lots of different levels of things in order for people to care. So that's what I try to do.
It's beautiful. That's what you just described is, I think, perfect advice for anyone that wants to start something. Like I've talked to so many photographers in the past few years of, hey, I want to do this and how do I get started? And like, you see the interest of it, but they just get stuck in that. I think Zizek called it early on in my podcast, the analysis paralysis, where you just like overthink and over engineer it, and then you just don't do it. Like at some point you just gotta see that path and try it.
Yeah, I've been working on this history podcast for a long time and I'm getting close, but I definitely I'm guilty of that myself, analysis paralysis. But the thing about paintball over time is that my history and how I kind of got into this position is I was kind of just forced to do a bunch of stuff, man. It was just like, hey, Matty, you're good at this. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. Like, well, you're doing it, so don't suck. And I'm like, okay, here we go. It's like you're just getting strapped into the roller coaster and you have advice. The roller coaster, but the roller coaster seems like it might be pretty fun. So you're like, I'm scared of this, but whatever, let's send it, see what happens. So that it kind of forces you to do things. So that's kind of, that's part of it too.
Yeah, and expanding on that, I just sat down with Oliver a few nights ago, and we really dove into like manifesting, and he opened my mind of looking at it completely differently, because up until that point I was like, I'm going to manifest, being on the pro field and doing XYZ, and he was like, that's great. He's like, every time I've manifested, something else has come from it. Like the journey has taken you elsewhere while you're trying to figure out what that thing is.
Indeed.
And I think paintball is a prime example of that. Like we just go through so many different parts of this journey where, we've got the award show next weekend and we've got a media chat, and it's like, well, you're going to be running the projector and you're going to be doing this. And like, I've never done that before, but we'll figure it out together. So it's cool what it teaches you.
Yeah. I mean, the sport is a metaphor for war. It is war with no death. Yeah. And if you look at great technological leaps or leaps in humans' ability, war over time creates, sometimes it will, take the base elements of a human, put them into the cauldron of chaos that is that visceral life or death existential battle for existence. And then on the other side, if you survive, you come out a completely different person with new skills that you did not have before. And so since we, that's paintball, it's this, again, it's not war. No one's dying.
Yeah.
But it started out as like, that's what it started out as. Like, hey, who would be good in a like real survival situation? I don't know. Let's actually put that, let's make that let's put that into practice and see how it goes down. And then now here we are all these years later. And so there is between the the logistics of everything surrounding it, the experience of playing it and training for it, all of those things do kind of put your soul to trial. And, and there's a lot of blessings that kind of come out of that. So I think that's one of the best things about, the gifts of the game, as I like to call them.
Yeah. And I think you just hit it for me. And that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you about is obviously being a previous professional paintball player and now being in the booth. Both of those, as you just described beautifully, there's so much hard work that goes into that. making that transformation from essentially on the field to in the booth, what have you learned about yourself?
I mean, a lot of it is kind of the same stuff. It's just has different detail, because in order to be, it's a lot, same stuff. Okay, what do I mean by that? I mean that you have to prepare. You have to be really good in a pressure situation. When things go wrong, you need to be able to pivot on a dime and change your actions to meet the new circumstances. And those are kind of all of the things that, I was good at in paintball and embraced. And then so to head into broadcasting, because there's, it's been now, I think this is my 22nd year, because I started in 2003 at Huntington Beach. And I've gone through so many different incarnations of what that is, like, what are we doing? And then even also working with a lot of documentary filmmakers over time and doing, and that's a different beast, but it's very similar. So it's just kind of, you have to, as Bruce Lee says, whatever, you got to be like water. Be like water, my friend. It's just, you just have to kind of be willing to head into a creative situation with a mindset of the end goal. What is our goal? Well, at the end of the day, the goal is to produce something of substance that people care about, that will move the needle, and at the very least continue to keep the needle where it is. I mean, you have to be realistic about things. But yeah, and there's just so many different, God, there's just so many stories, man. But in the beginning, it does begin with a will to want to get into that, like a will to be in that fight. Because, and then understanding that you are going to encounter difficulties and that are unforeseen and may come out completely out of the blue whenever. And you just have to kind of be willing to, to have enough willpower to push through those, either, in paintball, on-field struggles within the context and the framework of, the personalities on the team, logistics of getting that, army to that battle. And then same thing with productions, so, that's just how I've always kind of looked at it. I mean, there's just a lot of parallels. It's like, so wait, go back to your question again. I want to make sure I give it a good old solid answer. I'm not trying to dance around anything.
No. I mean, I appreciate the context, and sometimes going off on the trails really helps out.
Tangent make, geez, everyone knows that.
Yeah, which is why I think we love having you on podcasts, is because we hear more stories when people ask you different questions. But the question was, what have you learned about yourself transitioning from the field to the booth?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that one of the things I'm considering that I have, and I'll share this story with you, but considering what I was like as a child for a little bit of time, and some some really big issues I had with anxiety. I think what I learned about myself just in paintball in general, and then continuing on into this, multifaceted road of trying to carry our story forward as best I can, is that I'm really fucking good in the pressure situation, man. And that is, and I was just the huge problem anxiety as a kid, man, like real bad agoraphobia. I mean, we can go down that rabbit hole if you want. Maybe some people will share some similar experiences, but it's not something, I'm not scared to talk about it because it's just part of my history, but it is moments of weakness. And then I had some like super traumatic shit happen when I was 20, this murder suicide thing with some friends of ours. We were there for that. So I've just had some issues in my life where, with paintball, and when I look back on it, if I were to get, smoked by a car tomorrow on my way to go to train this Division 4 team here in San Diego that I train at SC Village, if I were to get smoked by a car and not be here anymore and I died, like I literally on my chest, and I got this tattoo specifically for this message to myself, and I stare at it every day. as like a reminder. It says, "For tomorrow we die," just to kind of have a little courage and a little confidence when you walk out into that world, knowing you're not made of glass. So I think that having had success in paintball as a player, and then now with what we've been doing, at least as best we can with what we have, to produce something that will help try to make people care about this thing we care about so much, is that I think that's what I learned about myself. I mean, I'm really good when shit is bad. I'm typically really good.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. And that, so like that right there is in a nutshell exactly why I want to do this podcast and why I want to share these stories is, I think at events, people will see you walking around and see, Ryan Greenspan and Alex Frazier and all these legends of the game. And they look at them as like, wow, those are like the untouchables. Have lived this perfect magic life. And none of us do. We all go through shit,
Yeah, dude.
And I think when people like you share those type of events and share that you had anxiety, somebody listening is going to be like, me too. Wow, I suffer from anxiety as well. And as you were saying that, like I literally felt the hair on my arm stand up because I battled anxiety for most of my life. And up until recently, about a year and a half ago, I didn't even know I had it, first of all. And like now that I recognize it, it's like, oh, that's what that was. And like all those moments you start to see it. So yeah, thank you so much for opening up and being vulnerable. I think the listeners are going to really resonate with that.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I don't know, it happened to me when I was so young. Like there was no term for it back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess there was, but when I look back at those moments going through, really bad times, man, really bad times. The first time it kind of crept up, and now you would just, it would be what was called like a panic attack.
Yeah.
But I was a child. I was in third grade. I just got done from recess, and I was about to go back inside. And I just had this, I was a very inquisitive and curious kid. Thought a lot about shit kids don't necessarily think about, like death, like what is eternity and all this, these kind of abstract concepts. But I just remember kind of coming in. I was like, I just was going down this like thought process in my brain and kind of just scared the shit out of myself. And I had this overwhelming, like I felt sick and I felt like I was gonna die and I didn't know what to do. And I'm in third grade, so I go into my teacher. I walk into the teacher and I'm like, I don't feel good. I need to, I'm like freaking out. I'm like, and she's like, okay, well, or he's like, some old grizzled dude who's like, what's wrong with you, boy? And I'm like, I don't know.
Just trying to skip class.
Yeah, go see the nurse. So I go see the nurse and like pulls out this like vomit bucket. She's like, if you got to puke into that, and I'm like, and then they call my dad. My dad's pissed off because he has to come from work to pick me up. My mom can't do it. Both my parents work. So my dad shows up in his, 74 pickup truck, and I'm like sitting cross-legged, and he's like pulls out a 5-gallon bucket, and he's like, if you got to puke, you puke in that bucket. Don't puke pools, and I'm just like, and then I'm just freaking out inside, and I'm just, and I get home and just had this, just kind of sat there in my bed, like not knowing what was wrong with my body or my brain. And it kind of then led into, it was like a year-long period. It went through, they, took me to the doctor. They're like, there's nothing wrong with him. He's healthy. And I just have these waves of what is now just a garden variety panic attack and anxiety. And just, and then, so they would, again, took me to all the, like tested me for all the different possible things it could be. They're like, he's fine. Anyway, so, kind of I just had to beat that on my own. So I kind of developed coping mechanisms for that. And then, fast forward into my early 20s, had this like bad infection in my back, this like tract of cysts. And when I was like pushed it off because I was playing pro paintball and Ironman at the time. And, and then had this super traumatic situation. That word fucking trauma around, but until you've actually been in some, stuff like that, it's like, like there is like people that will look down upon that word and don't know what it means or have never really been through anything like truly traumatic. But yeah, we had this situation where it's a long story and it's a horrible story, but a little girl I dated in high school, and then started dating one of my best friends. And I knew this dude better than most people I know in the world now. He was a very good friend of mine. Yeah. It was a long story, but, he ended up, killing her and himself in front of us at a birthday party. Wow. And so I learned a lot about, you know, how do I put this? The world, because when the police psychologist showed up to take us to go tell the girl's sister that her sister had been killed, and you know they're trying to help. Like, and I know that I could tell what and also in that moment, you know, it's like everyone reacts differently to those situations. You know, so it was like my sister was there; she was 16 at the time. So like after going over again, I'm trying to spare everyone the grisly details and just give the lesson here. You know, like what's the takeaway from this? Because it was very grisly. And I went over to hug my sister while it was going down, like right after it happened. And I was like, and I just remember saying to her, like, this is real. This is happening. Like, this is because this cloud of confusion descends upon you in these crazy moments. And some people freak out. Some people started just dropping to their knees and crying. Some people were frozen in shock. I got really angry. And so much so that when they put us all it was at a pizza place. They put us all in this pizza place and waited for the cops to come. They didn't cover the bodies, and the press shows up to film what's happening. And so the press is filming the bodies of our dead friends, and me and my other friend burst out of the
into like protect mode, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much rationality for it. I was just really pissed because I tried really hard to stop that situation from happening, because he had been threatening to kill himself, and some friends were like, oh, you know, they didn't take it seriously. I took it seriously. I mean, I went to see this guy. I would listen to him talk for hours. We tried to get in touch with his parents. Like, we really, again, it's a really long, I could take to tell the intricacies of this entire situation would require however much time we have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really tried really, really hard to stop that from happening, and it did anyway. So lesson learned: you can't control everything in life. And then I was just mad, pissed off. So we out of the pizza place and basically tried to go after the people, the camera crews were like, how dare you film our friends? And like, we were just like, and then we were just yelling at the cops. We're like, cover their bodies up, like just motherfucking the cops. And it was bad. But I remember talking to the police psychologist, and they had no idea what to do in this situation. No clue. They had no clue, like they were trying, but they cared, like they really cared, but they're trying to, there's just no talk. Like, sometimes you just have to deal as it is, and there's no way around it. It reminds me of there was this Dunkirk. There was a scene in Dunkirk. Have you seen that movie?
Yes, a great movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So remember the scene in Dunkirk when the old man they're driving the boat across the channel to go save the English soldiers who are all stuck in that pocket and about to get all killed by the Germans.
Yeah.
And that one kid who wants to go back because he was already there, and he's like, I can't go back. And no, you're not. This is not really a spoiler in the movie, but if you haven't seen it, go watch it. But it was a really good, intense look at an intense situation that you can't get out of. And the old man looks at him and he said, son, there's no getting around. There's no getting out of this. Basically, like, this is just what we have to do in this situation. And so you need to steel yourself for that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I mean, it was rough. And that was when I was 20, and I was, just got on the Ironman. And, so then had to go to practice. I actually went the next morning. So that was like the very next morning, because I just didn't think about it. So I just went to work reffing a tournament the next day.
So you just shut it off completely.
Which came back to bite me. Yeah. It came back to bite me for sure. And that's kind of where I'm going with the story. But yeah, it was bad, man. And so, but life does go on. That's part of it. But I remember sitting at this funeral, and the people that weren't there, that didn't see it, that didn't know the whole story, they're getting up and giving, flowery speeches about him. His parents were there. And then everyone's crying, and I'm just like, I'm just sitting, stewing, burning inside of this funeral, just so on fire, just so angry, so much anger. Because and the whole time I'm just thinking, I'm like, so this is what a murderer's funeral looks like, and anyway, so yeah, again, like I said, super long, convoluted, horrible situation. but and then after that, had this infection in my back. Anyway, I kind of pushed all this stuff down, so the anxiety came back, got me again when I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
But then after I got through that and had to, and what I loved about paintball was it kind of forced you into, it was like exposure therapy, because I'm on Survivor Island with all these young killers, with all the Eric Roberts and the Billy Wings and the Davey Williamsons and the, Oliver Langs and like all these people, McLaughlin's, Kevin Arcillas, whatever, like all the young lions coming out of California that made that badass team that we had, in that moment. But I just, so it's like by the time I got to having to do things, where it's for public consumption, which is very nerve-wracking. I had two, when the devil, when the devil comes up in your mind and goes, "You're not good enough for this. Why are you doing this?"
Imposter syndrome.
Why you're not the person for this. You have to have the ability to counter that part of your psyche. And since I'd been through so much shit in my mind already, it was a little bit easier to be like, I'll just say yes to this. Like, I'm scared. Like, I'm definitely scared. I'm nervous about this. I have anxiety that I'm not going to be good enough, but I'm going to say yes anyway and try because this person seems to believe in me. Even if I don't believe in myself, the person that's giving me this opportunity seems to have some sort of faith that I'm the right person for the job. So I'm going to give it I'm going to do the best I can with what I have in this situation.
And there's so much power in, if you don't believe in yourself, just having one person believe in you, like that is earth shattering for some people. If you've never had that before, everything with this podcast that I'm doing, like I never would have imagined I had a podcast, but my wife was like, you should do this. Like, you're passionate about it. I can see it in your photos. And I was like, oh, and like, you're right. Like, it just kind of clicked something in your mind. Like, all right, well, I mean, if you believe in me, like maybe somebody else does. It's wild.
Yeah. And also, brother, I'm not trying to trauma dump on you, but I'm just trying to give this, I'm just putting this out in the world because I've talked a little bit about this in some podcasts, but it's like, like this is real. Life's fucking real, man. Like, like real things happen. People are dealing with real stuff. There's this famous scene, and this, since we're creatives and we're people that actually have to put, caretake a creative story and put it into the world. Yeah. There's this one scene in Adaptation. Have you seen that movie, Adaptation?
I have not seen that one, no.
Oh, bro, you got to see it. It's super good.
Add it to my list.
So Nick Cage plays two brothers. He plays twins in it. I believe it's Charlie Kaufman. So he wrote, I think it was in Turtle Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Anyway, like he got super famous in Hollywood, but he was given this task to turn Susan Orlean's book, The Orchid Thief, into a movie, which he couldn't do. Wow. So he, and then, kind of like when Marcel Proust ended up writing his famous, best novel, or one of the best novels ever written, which name is escaping me. Anyway, but he kind of spent years thinking like, what should I write about? And ended up writing about like a guy struggling to write a story, and then ended up becoming super big. Anyway, so in this, there's a scene where, there's Nick Cage plays these twins, these two brothers. One of them writes like thrillers and like these bullshit movies. And then the other one, the main character, he's this cerebral guy, writes all this thoughtful stuff. And he's, has to turn this thoughtful book into this movie. And he doesn't want to add, he doesn't want to put like drugs and sex and violence in, and which is hilarious, which is where the movie kind of goes. Anyway, but the point is that, so he's sitting there in this screenwriting seminar, which is a real screenwriting seminar done by a guy named Robert McKee. And but it's played by this famous Scottish actor. Anyway, so the character raises his hand and he's like, well, and then the guy, so it's in a theater, guy's on stage giving a seminar, and he picks him. He's like, you. And then Nick Cage's character goes, well, what if I write a story where nothing much happens, kind of like in the real world? And the guy pauses, and he's got his coffee cup, and he pauses for a second, and he goes, first of all, if you write a screenplay without conflict or crisis, you will bore your audience to fucking tears. And second of all, nothing happens in the real world. Are you out of your fucking mind? Every day, a man is betrayed. Somewhere in the world, a man is betrayed by his best friend for a woman. Every day, somewhere in the world, a woman watches her child die on the steps of a church. And he goes on, and then he's just like, and if you can't put that stuff that happens in real life into your movie, then why should I give you my 2 hours for it? You know, so it's like, that's the thing. Like, this real crazy stuff happens every single day somewhere in the world. You're lucky if it never happens to you. You're lucky that you got the grace of God. If you get to go your entire life and some horrible thing didn't happen to you. But for most people, there's some super traumatic shit that you're going to have to deal with and continue to move on. But that's paintball, dude. You know, like, it's not, you know, again, it's war with no death. It's a metaphor, you know? So it's like, but real situation, get cut, you know, like, you may not be good enough to be on that team. You may make a good move, get, you know, completely shot 15 times, bonus balled, whatever, all these, it's a microcosm. It's a very safe way to have those experiences where it is, you're not playing for your life. You're not playing for your fortune. You're not playing for all these things, you know, like, you're choosing to engage in this battle that's hard and humbling. And even if you do something right, you may physically hurt a bit, even when you do the correct thing. So there's just all this stuff there. Anyway, so, man, that was a tangent, but
but like, we can tie that back to paintball, right? Because, like, as you're going through, you know, that traumatic event you went through in the movie, I went right to watching professional paintball athletes in the pits, and you could have one team and have 5 different characters that react differently. Somebody is screaming, somebody's crying, somebody is just emotionless, and that's how everyone reacts to what could be a traumatic event for them. You know, you could have won every single prelim, every single playoff match, and then in the last 30 seconds lose the finals. And, like, people don't know how to cope with that. Like, how do you release that? And everyone handles that situation differently.
Yeah, totally. No, for sure. So, you know, but that's, again, it's the gift of the game, man. I just love this game so much because it does give you a steady dose of humility, and you have to treat that with what those learning moments actually, and then there's the decision to make. Are you going to let your ego get in the way? Are you going to, you know, take that moment and get better from it? But also, there's a lot of human moments in there too. I mean, you know, coaching divisional teams are just, you know, it's like talking to all these different pros, and over the years, it's like part of it's being a psychologist, you know? So it's just like, you have to deal with human emotions and humans' desires and what is or is not the best situation for a given person, given a certain, you know, whatever the moment may be in their lives. So there's just so much there. And, but yeah, I mean, again, to kind of square the circle, but to head it back to, is just that, one of the things I think that I'm really happy that I decided to do all these things, or to choose to do these very difficult things, was that, is that because I had agoraphobia so bad when I was like 9, that my dad's like, hey, trying to cheer me up, like, let's go see the Padres. And then we go drive off, and I'm like freaking out so bad. I'm like, Dad, pull over. And I have to walk. You know? Like, I was so weak mentally at the time that I couldn't even go out in public to a baseball game with my father. And then then you fast forward, and I'm like, you know, playing paintball on one of the best teams in the world and winning the world title as like a dude on the field, or like pulling off. That's why I loved low body situations. I tell dudes like, coach, I'm like, guys, we're not supposed to win low body situations. Stop feeling stressed. You're not supposed to win a 1-on-3, dude. You know, you should feel no stress in this moment at all. You're supposed to die here. Okay. Now I'd like you to put up a valiant fight, get creative, have fun out there, bro. Like, you know, like, make something happen, you know, like, you're not like, no one's going to, oh my God, you didn't pull off that 1-on-3. How dare you? You know, it's like, so there should be no pressure in those moments. So I again, looking, you know, it's like, man, it was, you know, it reminds me of, it's like, so Joe Walsh from the Eagles. Have you ever seen the Eagles documentary? The from the band, not the football team that just won the Super Bowl?
No, I have not seen that one.
Oh, you got to see it. I was like a prophet for this film when it came out like 10 years ago. I was telling especially creatives, that I was like, you have to watch this, or any paintball person. I'm like, you have to watch this, just because the social dynamic of what they were trying to do was so fascinating. Anyway, but Joe Walsh, the, you know, famous, one of the best rock guitarists ever. Yeah. He has this really interesting moment where they, you know, he describes the story of this band, because I think they outsold Michael Jackson. Like, they're one of the highest selling bands of all time, and they have some, you know, just iconic hits. But he's like, you know, is like, when you're old and you look back on it, at the time it seems like, and I'm butchering this quote, but it's like at the time, it seems like you're in this crazy whirlwind and, you know, everything's about to end and nothing's ever going to work out. And then, but when you're old and you look back at it all, the story looks like a finely crafted novel.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I look at it now, you know? So
that's beautiful. And that's exactly where I want to go. It was what I'm aspiring to be, is to get to that point in my life where I look back and it's like, wow, I'm so happy all of that happened. Right now in this moment, you know, like, I don't know if my sounds good. I don't know if this is recording correctly, and
sounds great.
But like it creates all of that, those nerves that you go through doing something new. But when you get on the outside of it and look back, you're so thankful for all of it. And it's like, wow, that just made sense. Like, it all made sense.
Absolutely. So yeah, hey, dude, just think, hey, everything, your voice sounds great. The mic set up in that perfect podcast situation, angled, you know, over to the side. You got your Shellda thing in the background. Yeah. Your front lit. You got the back all dark. You got the set dialed, brother.
I appreciate it. I'm trying to take this thing to the moon. Like, I truly believe in it. And, you know, just like you, paintball's been a passion for me almost my whole entire life. I had never made it to the pro scene. But I wanted to find a way, you know, how can I leave my mark on the sport? And, you know, getting back into the photography side of it, and obviously the children's book, and now this, I just really want to bring that human element to the game. So I can't thank you enough for, one, being open and being vulnerable to share some of the stories that you have so far. You are so spot on. I think every single person that steps on a paintball field or at a tournament, they've all gone through something, whether high or low, and there's some type of relatability there. But I think what holds us all back is being vulnerable. You know, so how would you give that advice to somebody, like, especially in the paintball community?
That's just a tough thing. You know, I did a show with Justin Rabikoff, and we went down the rabbit hole on his issues and anxiety. Yeah. And I talked to him offline, you know, hey man, we can keep this. We can just talk about, you know, you always have that conversation when we're doing these stuff where it's like, hey, you know, I got to ask certain questions, you know, what can you can't talk about, you know, I mean, I've got to ask certain questions though, depending on what type of media we're creating. But, you know, with him, I was like, hey, because I knew as a friend, I've known him since he was 9, and I've known his father for a long time. And I was like, I know you've dealt with this stuff, bro. Like, is this something you want to talk about? And he was like, let me think about it. And he hit me back, and to his, you know, vast credit, he said, yeah, you know, even if it just helps one person out there, you know, then I think it's a good thing. He was very honest about his own struggles with that. So the tough thing is that, you know, just the bluster of the tough persona, which is required in some situations, man. But like, you can be, you know, vulnerable when the situation requires it. And this is, again, the lesson I needed to learn at the time, because I dealt with that so poorly, you know, just pushed all the anger down and was so pissed off about everything. And because I wasn't willing to deal with all of that anger, you know, maybe that did give me some positive, you know, again, there's, you know, Thomas Sowell, a famous African-American political genius. He has this great saying, you know, and the saying, you know, he's talking more about how the world works than this sort of stuff, but it's the same sort of situation. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. So sometimes something that will give you, sometimes, so maybe I got a little extra chip on my shoulder from that to give me some fire when I was young, but it ended up costing me in the long run. But then at the end of that, having all those situations made me a much stronger human being, because I had to go through hell in my mind in order to, and figure it out on my own in order to come to some sort of conclusion, which then gave me strength. But the thing is that, you know, having moments of, you know, like unless you're a fucking sociopath, like, you're not just going to be this strong, crazy beast all the time. It's just not reality. Like, again, we have to have serious conversations about how the world actually really works. And in fact, when I talk to people, when we're talking about projects or something or whatever it may be, I'm like, hey man, you know, or when teams hit me up to coach now, I've just kind of started coaching some divisional teams. And I tell the owners or the coaches, or like whatever I'm working with, who's hit me up, I'm like, look, dude, I'm going to give you radical honesty. I'm not gonna disrespect your time or these guys' money and time that they're putting into this by bullshitting them. Like, I've seen a lot in my 30-something years doing this, and if you're going to bring me in, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think about this. We're going to have serious conversations about this, and everyone has to buy into that. And if they are, then that's going to be a shorter route to getting great performances, instead of us just sitting around patting each other on the back and bullshitting each other when we just had a fucking horrible day. You know, so it's like, you got to have a serious talk sometimes in order for that to work. And so, you know, and that's how we've been able to kind of do a lot of these things on shoestring budgets or whatever, man. Again, there's so many different projects and different things that have happened, but you know, it's just,
honesty.
Yeah. And I mean, there's, you know, and you can't be, you know, there are times when to get something out of, you know, to get the best out of somebody, you do have to you can't just go and root. There's not, and it's not ruthlessness. It's giving the right message to the right person at the right time, you know? So, but there has to be the nuggets, however you know, like when I give my kid medicine, sometimes it's like, you know, you have to, you know, if he's eating something that doesn't taste good, even though they make the stuff taste like candy these days. But like, think about it. You're giving somebody acetaminophen. Like my kid's got an ear infection right now. Okay. So in order for him to eat that, you know, I can't have him swallow a pill. He's 4.5. So they make his medicine taste like cherries, you know? So it's like, sometimes you got to make the medicine taste like cherries, but you have to give them the medicine, you know? Yeah. And so, do you understand the metaphor that I'm trying to say? I know you do.
Totally. You still have to deliver like the message behind it. There's ways to do it, but like at the end of the day, you still have to get that through to somebody. Yeah. And so, yeah, I totally resonate with that. And I think, you know, I want to touch back just a little bit, because you were talking about like everything that you went through and, you know, put a chip on your shoulder. My wife is going through like some amazing, like just mind work right now. Like she's, you know, going through a lot of like inner child work and releasing a lot of things. And it's so motivational for me to like, wow, I didn't realize I had all that shit. And like, then like I'm unlocking it and I'm releasing it. And I was going through a point where I would beat myself up like, man, I can't believe I did that, or I hated that version of me. And she said something really powerful, and I think this might impact what you went through too, is she's like, that served you at that point in your life. Like when you went through that, there's a reason why you maybe protected yourself, or you were shut down, or maybe you had that chip on your shoulder. It was serving a purpose in your life at that moment, and you were able to grow from that.
Yeah, I would like to think that. I mean, it's also, you know, when you look back on things, it's so easy to say, oh, I regret that I should have done it this way, or I should have done it that way. And you may be right. You may be 100% right. Maybe you did not handle that situation the right way. Yeah. I would just say, if you have improved over time though, give yourself some grace. Yeah. Because there is no, and then depending on what are we talking about? You know, it's like, you know, if we're talking about interpersonal relationships, or if we're talking about life goals, I mean, sure, you gotta, yes, you want to hold yourself to account a little bit, but also you have to kind of treat your old self with a little bit of kid gloves, because you may have not known. Like, I had no idea at the time. That was my initial reaction. I was 20, you know, like I had no idea that was the foolish way to do that. And I don't even know. And people were telling me that, hey, you should probably go and see someone. And I was like, why? The police psychologists that we saw, they had no idea what they were doing. And again, to respect to them, again, looking back, like they were trying, you know, like it's an incurable situation. You just have to figure it out. Anyway, so, you know, yeah, it's you know, it's just, it's something that's, as a man of words, some things are beyond words, because they are things that you have to, like, we use words to deal with other humans, but a lot of the stuff that we deal with ourselves is beyond words. And having to come to terms with that, you know, because you can talk to yourself all day long, you know, not like you're having a monologue with yourself outside like a crazy person, but the inner dialogue.
That self-talk.
Yeah, that self-talk, you know. Anyway, so there's just a lot of different ways to look at it. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that my I don't know, my coping mechanism for that was anger, and but also that, and this is where I appreciate the Stoics, but Stoicism sometimes will burn you, in the long run. You have to, as they say, flow and let it go, which I think is also a powerful way to handle shit sometimes too.
Yeah, it just, make it for what it is and find our way to release it. And it kind of ties back to that Bruce Lee saying that you had, right? Like let it be like water, just it keeps flowing, it finds a way.
Yeah. But I mean, but overall, it's these things that have happened to me over time, they've just given me great strength but every now and then, I'm still the same person,
Sure.
So I'm older, but I'm not, it's not like I was, went through the chrysalis of the butterfly, and humans don't do that. It's like we can paint the beautiful metaphor all you want, like, oh yeah, you're in the chrysalis and you came out this or whatever, the forge. And, we just, again, humans are masters at morphing and taking different concepts and trying to paint this picture to make it make sense, to, put meaning to stuff. But at the same point, like, I'm still the same person that had to deal with all that. And so even still, like, I'll feel inklings, like it will be World Cup or something. And, it's a big moment. And all of a sudden I'll feel is the Hunter S. Thompson, one of my favorite writers, there's this one line, it was like, I felt I felt it creep up my spine, like the first rising vibes of an acid frenzy. All these horrible realities began to dawn on me, so it's like, when you feel that, if you've been through it before, just like whatever with paintball, man, it's like having to deal with the magnitude of these moments, like you have mechanisms that you can be able to kind of just slow that, because it's a physical response.
It's like where do you feel it in your body? I think there's a lot of people resonate that too. Is like, do you feel it in your chest? Do you feel it in your arms? And if you can find that where you feel it, then you could help stop it, or at least lower it.
Yeah. Well, breath's a big thing.
Yeah.
Breath and just, you can think your way through a lot, man. I think the mind is so powerful. This manifestation thing. I get so frustrated when people get like super woo about manifestation, because manifestation to me is not this, oh, I'm going to sit down and meditate and a Ferrari is going to show up, like that's not how it works. So it is a real thing in the sense that your mind is incredibly powerful. You can, given enough practice, do really amazing things with your mind to summon a certain indomitable spirit. It can conquer things and can give you great strength. And it also can be a giant weakness. It can be those things congruously at the same time, and so that's where it's difficult. But then there's also biomechanical ways of, it's like how you hold your body, how your breath is controlled. There's a lot to that too, so yeah. Anyway, dude, sorry, but like I said, I don't mean to trauma dump on you, but I saw like Ryan Gray had shared some real shit, so I was like, oh yeah, Dan's doing like a real shit podcast, like let's have a real conversation about that.
And again, like I can't thank you enough for that, because even on Ryan's show, I've had so many people reach out and just say how they have gone through a sobriety journey, or they are going through it. And I think there's something when somebody hears either a hero or somebody that look up to going through something similar, it gives like another unlocking of like, oh my God, that person went through that. I can go through that too. And I can push myself to get through this. So I guarantee you, when this thing airs, somebody's going to send me a message or in the comments, they're going to say, yeah, I went through something just as Matty did, and this show helped me out through it. So I really appreciate it.
Well, it's like, the cool thing about the way media is put into the world these days is we have this amazing ability to impact people we may never know, and that's why I love that word inspire. I said that in DQ's video, which was an interesting talk about an interesting creative process of how that one came about, but or just how the interview came about. But, is that I just love the word inspire, because the word inspire means to breathe life into. And,
wow.
And that's, and I think that's the etymology of words is a fascinating thing, because it's almost like you will have a word get created that's almost like a cliche, but you're condensing a phrase or something like to breathe life into a few syllables, but then it becomes so useful that becomes the word we use. So it's like a lot of words in a lot of ways are just cliches that have been said for hundreds of years, but condensed. So it's like abbreviated and condensed and then carried on because it's so useful. That's the reason why we use language. Language is incredibly useful.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
But that's one of my favorite words in all of the words. Yeah. That's one of my favorite words, inspire.
Yeah. I love inspire. And something that really stuck out to me recently, one of my friends and a huge supporter of the show, Joel, he sent me something on Instagram, and it was like 4 or 5 different pictures of, if you ever are upset that your video or your picture or whatever it is has only impacted this many people, it showed a visual representation of like one person, of 10 people, of 500 people, of 1,000 people. And like when it showed the picture of 1,000 people, it was a theater full of people. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that as like, oh, when you see 1K, that's 1,000 people. That's if you were to tell somebody like, hey, you're going to fill up a theater with your show, people are like, I'm not going to go on stage. Like, that's so scary.
But that's what I love. But Dan, that's what I love, bro. I love that. So it's like, I love golf, and if I need to make a great golf shot, I will picture thousands of people around me, or I will ask somebody to like talk shit or give me money, or not give me money, but like put money on the line, because I need the pressure to do the best. The stakes have to be high. Like I do my best work when the stakes are high. And that's, I think, a mechanism of just how I've kind of lived this life, through paintball and through, the creative endeavors that I've done, because I always knew that, I'm not creating things in a vacuum. Like, I create things for people to consume every time I create it. And that is something that obviously can be incredibly intimidating, and it definitely is. I'm not sitting here like, oh, I'm some, crazy, like, oh, dude, yeah, this is just how it's done. You got to, make yourself as stressed out as possible. No, fuck that. That's not what I'm talking about. It's still super stressful, but you have to appreciate that moment. You really have to kind of look at that as a blessing in a way, because it just gives you, it puts a lot, there's something on the line. We're playing for something, it's not going into oblivion. Like it doesn't just live in nothing. It's not living in a vacuum. It's for something. There's a reason for it. You're doing it for a specific reason. And that's awesome, man. Like, that's a really cool thing. And, honestly, but it takes me longer to do things,
Yeah, totally.
Because it's like, if I'm writing like because I don't just sit down and, I remember I had to have this, discussion with Dave Youngblood one time, because he was like, we got to get this thing out. And I had to push back and be like, look, I have to do careful writing for this, because this is a super crucial thing that we're doing. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's like, so sometimes, it may take me quite a while to craft 5 sentences for a documentary or something, or because, it's, if it's done properly and it says the right thing, that could be evergreen content that people will still listen to years from now and draw some sort of inspiration or strength from. And I learned that lesson with the Sunday Drivers intro.
Oh man, I was waiting for you to, because I was going to try right back to that. There's a few like 13 or 14-year-olds at my field, and every Sunday, like, hey, I just watched like Sunday Drivers, and like, the Matty Marshall speech in there, and just like, that's a prime example of, I'm sure so much time and energy went into that speech at the beginning. And here we are, what is it, 20 years later? And that thing is still impacting people. Like, it's crazy.
I think I wrote that I think it's 25 years now.
That's wild. People that weren't even born yet are now just seeing that for the first time, and it's going to inspire their career.
Well, I chose second person with that on purpose, because second person, like Great American Paintball. If you guys don't subscribe, please do, because we have to give money to things that we care about.
Yeah.
Money is the lifeblood of all commerce. And in order, if you like creative things, like this podcast, and again, shout out to, to Junior and Gina and Hormesis, but that's a different conversation, but that's a real thing too. But when we're again, as I said earlier in this conversation, people need things, whatever they need, cars, they need houses, they need, like I had a plumber, like I can fix some stuff around my house, but there was this weird vibration that we're hearing in the walls that sounded like, and I was like, I have no idea. My wife's like, do you have any idea what that is? I'm like, no, this is why we have plumbers. Call the plumber, so we get the plumber over and he's like, oh, it's this valve, and ended up not being a disaster. But, but with that one, it was, that wasn't a very intimidating thing, because that was the very first thing that I'd ever put out to the world as something like that. Like I never, like I was a player. I was used to doing that. I was used to playing in front of people. I was used to that stress, but there's a different level of, when you're letting people into your inner thoughts and you have to create something like that. And it's like the open of the movie.
It's raw.
So, yeah. But Patrick Spohr had come up to me and he was like, hey, because I was going to San Diego State for creative writing, and had written a few articles, and he was like, hey, I want you to write and record this. I want to do this opening monologue for my next film. And I was like, well, what do you want me to write? Hoping he'd give me something. And he was like, I can't. He's like, no, man, I can't tell you what to write. Just write your experience. And, but I had and this is where mentors are huge. Or getting positive reinforcement can be massive for people that are dealing with some sort of, whether it be social anxiety or just anxiety, or like, or imposter syndrome, or just, that voice in your head's like, you're not, why would you do this? You're not good. You're not, why would you think that you are good enough to do this? That, again, that devil that lives in everyone's soul. And if it doesn't live in your soul, God bless you. Because I would like to kill mine, if possible. But it's not. It's just something you have to live with. Anyway, but so I had an interesting kind of mentorship when I was at San Diego State with this writer named Lydia Yuknovich. She was from the Pacific Northwest, and so when I was like 19, 20, and that's when I decided that I thought I was, it's something that I was interested in. It's like that. It's like I don't know the name of it, but it's like a Venn diagram. It's a Japanese concept, and it's like what you're good at, what you love. What you can, I can't remember all of them, but it's like, and then what the world will pay you for, and then there's like this overlapping thing in the middle. So I had said, people, because at the time I was working 3 jobs. I was a manager at a movie theater. I was playing pro paintball. I was going to school, playing for the Ironman, and I was a manager at a movie theater, and I was a business administration major, because I thought that was a very logical thing to do. I'm like, I already have experience helping run this business. If I get a business degree, and if I had done this, it'd probably be way better for my, my life as it stands now. I'm sure if my kids listen to this, they'll be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why did you do that? But people, we're always like, because I love to read. I've always loved to read. Writing I was good at it, but it was hard for me. Was never the person that, like, writing does not come easy to me. I don't just sit down and it just flows like water. No, it's more like chipping granite. So it wasn't easy. To choose writing, or to choose to write things, for me was a very difficult choice, because it never really came easy to me. But the things that I produced, even when I, like in my very first class that I was in, I took this intro to creative writing class, and there was like this, also it's a funny story too, because like the dude that I took the intro to creative writing class with, a guy named Andy Mingo, who was a graduate student at San Diego State, ended up marrying Lydia Yuknovich. So that was kind of like a very, it was like an interesting kind of thing going on at the time. They're still married to this day, so it worked out great for them 20 something years later. But Andy was great, like he was this very forceful personality. He was like big, huge, burly dude, long hair, looked like a lumberjack, like just gnarly dude. And then we all turned in our first stuff. So this is like kind of the first stuff I'd ever given to anyone. And he chose one of my things to read, to the class. He's like, oh, I just want to read some of the gems that I found out here. And he read one of my things. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then, so I got
that validation right there.
yeah, so it was like validation, positive reinforcement, a lot of self-doubt, obviously, like what, like I this is an inclination of mine, but this is really hard to do, but
Yeah.
I'm getting positive reinforcement. And then I went on to then take classes with Lydia Yuknovich, and which actually ended up being cool because I took one class with her, and in that class, I would, you have to go around, you write your stuff and then you read it. And this was one of the first times that anyone in my entire life, so I read this piece that I wrote, and then I finish, and she doesn't say that was great or you could have done this and that. She just takes a deep breath and goes, she's like, I really love listening to you read. You have a lovely voice. And I was like, really? Because to me, you listen to yourself like when you're young and you hear your own voice, and it just, because like what the voice that you hear of yourself, the reason why this messes a lot of people up, the voice you hear in your head is deeper than the voice that people hear out in the public, right?
Yeah.
Because you're hearing it from your own jaw structure and your ears, like you're hearing your own voice differently. So when everyone kind of freaks out when they hear their voice recorded, no one had ever in my entire life told me anything positive about my voice. So, like that wasn't a thing. And then, so she just, every time that she would like, oh, let's let, Matt read, and then I'd read it. And so she was like super, very reinforcing positively about my voice and the stuff that I was writing. And then I ended up, so I was building a lot of confidence in that arena because I was having a lot of, very minor success in a way. But for me, it was success because my mentors were digging the stuff that I was creating. And then, it, I took another class from her, and it was like a, writing 504 or whatever, and creative writing 504. And then, so at the end of the second or third class, she brings, it was like, there was 2 master students in poetry that were taking that class for the whatever credits they needed. And then me, and she's like, can Carrie, Ryan, and Matt Marshall stay after class? So we stay, and she's like, hey, you guys are wasting your time in this class. She's like, I propose that we do our own class. We'll have it at my house. You don't need to come every week. Come every other week. She's like, bring your work, bring some booze, bring whatever you want. We're gonna talk about art. We're gonna talk about life. We're gonna talk about your writing. And as long as you guys are diligent about the craft, you don't have to worry about grades. I'll just give you guys all A's no matter what, as you show up ready to talk about art, creativity, and our work. And it's going to be hardcore. And I was like, this is awesome. So I was like, and we were like, yeah, of course. So we would like show up and then started at her house and then go to the pool house, and, like in Ocean Beach, she lived in Ocean Beach. We used to call in San Diego the People's Republic of OB. It's wild down there. Anyway, so that was a really cool thing. So that was kind of how it started, where I was like, I had confidence that I could produce something of worth for the paintball world. In a voice that people would at least, I had enough where I was like, all right, fuck it, let's do this, because so that was at least my mindset heading into that piece.
I mean, it all ties back to what you said earlier. Like, one person believed in you, and like the power of that one person changed the course of your life. It sounded like I would imagine you probably wouldn't be doing what you're doing now with the commentating and all the things that you've done for ESPN and all the other voiceovers, if it wasn't for her.
100%. Again, it's the power of a good mentor.
Does she know that?
I sent her a message. I think mid 2000. We have lost touch, but I sent her a message in the mid 2000s, like after I had done, like I was, hey Lydia, this is, I was like, hey, and just wanted to say thank you so much for believing in me when I was younger, because she knew I was like, I had told her what I was doing.
Yeah.
She knew that I was a pro paintball player. But then I told her, I was like, hey, I've done, a voiceover artist for documentaries and a character in these things. And I've written for magazines, and we just did a show on ESPN, like, just thank you so much. And she was like, oh, I'm so proud of you. Like, that's amazing. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I didn't really want to impose on her. It's like, it's just not really, I don't really want to be one of those people that's like, it's not like she's hitting me up, so I don't want to be like constantly hitting her up or anything. I mean, maybe she's still alive. Like, maybe I should send another message at some point in time, but Yeah, it was awesome. But then
cool.
but then that piece, did you ever hear that story of how that piece almost never happened though? Like after I wrote it?
No, I don't think so. And I try. I mean, I searched the internet a long time ago. I was just trying to get as much paintball content as I could, and I don't think I ever came across that.
And well, I'm going to tell the story. I'm going to preface it with the fact that I love how it, kind of, I get why. So Brian Benini, I love Brian Benini.
Yeah.
But at the time, Brian and Pat were kind of at creative odds because Brian was funding it, and it, Pat takes a while to make amazing things. And thank God, because it ended up being an iconic evergreen piece of content that people still enjoy to this day. But, so Pat kind of went around Brian's back with this intro thing, so it was, he was like, hey, I want you to write this intro. Took me weeks to write it. Again, went with second person on purpose in order to kind of hook because when you write in second person, well, it basically is it's a hook. It's like a conscious hook in order to get people to, be living in the words with you.
Yeah, so you feel it.
Because if I had decided to write that in first person, I am thinking this. So, it happens on a random Monday coming back from an event. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing that. That's first person. Third person would be, depending on which third person you're going with, and he's doing this, she's doing that. It's different. Second person is you're doing this. Yeah. And so second person is a tough tense to write well in, but if you do it well, especially for short pieces, it can be very powerful. So that's why I went with second person for that. Wow. But then I wrote it, and then so I was like, okay, Pat, I think I got something that might work, and he's like, okay, come up and record it. And then Pat found out, and he was like, so him and so Pat and Brian are arguing on the phone and we're up by the ocean in northern San Diego by where their house or their condo was, where they had their studio. And it was, getting heated. And so I was just like, hey, I'm gonna go outside, like, hey, I'm gonna go walk and just let you figure it out. Yeah. Like, I'm like, are we doing this? He's like, I don't know, so I was like, okay. So, and then I just kind of go and I just watch the sunset. So basically the same sunset that you watch when you see that Sunday Drivers that I'm like walking, from, that was the same sunset, so I'm just kind of like, so I watched the sunset, and it's been a while, man. And this isn't like when you could pull your smartphone out and just start, so I'm just sitting there twiddling my thumbs, nothing to read, nothing to look at, just watching the sunset for 20, 30 minutes. And so I kind of walk up now, go to Pat. I'm like, oh, hey, are we doing this? And he's like, and he kept saying over and over to Brian, like, hey, man, I'm just trying to finish a film. And so finally he gets off the phone. I hop in, shotgun, and I'm like, what are we doing? Are we going to do this or not? And he's like, yeah, let's just go record it. And so we drive over to, so now there's a lot of doubt, so I'm like, again, in that moment where I'm like, yeah, pressure hits, right? So I'm like, okay, so then we go and record it. And that's, that was the recording that you still can hear to this day. So, not really knowing if it was going to work, if people were going to like it, if anything. And then, to Brian's credit, he came up and apologized to me after, it came out, and his explanation, which is very true, was like, dude, again, Matty, sorry, apologies, bro. It ended up awesome. I did have faith in you. I know you're, good at what you do, which, I mean, I'm like, okay, great. Like, I wasn't even sure I'm good at what I do at that point, like, I was just like, dude, like, I hope this works. Like, I have no idea if people are going to like this or not. But yeah. And then he was like, yeah, again, just apologetic and awesome. So, shout out to Brian, but, and shout out to Pat for believing in me. But that was, so then when all, that had happened, and then a couple other things, and then we get to when the TV stuff started to happen, at least I had some confidence there. But that was totally different, because that's a departure. I'm not like going in my lab and writing up stuff to then read as a voiceover thing. It's more of like, yeah, dude, it's live. We're turning the cameras on, start talking. Like, I was not ready for that. But wow, so that was also intimidating in its own way.
You hear that so much, I think, in today's world about like YouTube videos and music and different songs is where you hear that push pull of someone who thinks, hey, this is great, we need to do this, and then someone who's trying to take it off, right? Like, you know, I watched a few documentaries about Queen, I think in the past few years, and some of their iconic songs, people didn't want them to come out with, like in that creative room, like, hey, this is not going to work. Like this, Bohemian Rhapsody, I think, was the first one where they had like all the instruments and like that long play in it. They didn't want them to come out with it. And now look at it. It's one of the most iconic songs out there.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's risk, right? It's
it, yeah.
There's a certain element of risk where, and there's, you know, are you risking your money? Are you risking yourself? You know, because when you put yourself out there, you are then, once something is given to the world, again, people need things.
Yeah.
And people need to be entertained. The paintball story, this is where, when I looked at it, I was like, all right, well, the paintball story needs to be told. And there's different ways to tell stories.
Yeah.
You know, and at the time, this is why I love Paint Magazine, because at the time, you know, paintball media was basically like photos of dudes holding like their banners and trophies. There wasn't a lot of real, it wasn't as, so there's what's happening in the moment, and then then how that's being covered.
Yeah.
How true to that is the actual like action and emotion, real life drama, interpersonal relationships, like all those things. How close are we getting to what exists and like what's actually going down, and then what we get, right? Yeah. And so when I saw, you know, because and it was a blessing for me, but when it was like a great education for my job that I eventually had, that I currently do now, but even with these early, you know, we're not early, but you know, 2000s, or when I started writing for Paint. But so I got a job at a paintball store, and at that paintball, it's called Paintball Connection, and I was 16 years old, and it was a slow store. We didn't sell a lot of stuff. It eventually ended up closing down like a year and a half later, and that's why I had to go get a job at a movie theater. But the one of the cool things for me about that was that at that paintball store, there was every single magazine that had ever been published, ever. Wow. Every paintball magazine that had ever been published, they had archived at the store. Wow. So while it was slow, I just read the whole history of paintball, you know, and multiple times. I would just sit there and read Paint Check and PGI and like all these different magazines. And honestly, this is where I feel a weight of guilt, though, because when that store closed, they gave me a big portion of that. And I ended up, you know, because I was living at my parents' house and we didn't have a lot of storage space because my dad had all his like construction shit in his like this one area. But I left and it doesn't rain a lot in San Diego. So I accidentally left that archive out in the rain and it got destroyed. So I've always been like, I know, yeah. So oh my gosh, yeah. Like I've been feeling that ever since that happened, that guilt, you know. So I think another part of the like, fuck you, like you got to do this, dude. Like you know, allowed through your incompetence and laziness, you know, to allow this like archive of history to be destroyed. Yeah. You know, I kind of feel that, and still feel that way to this day. But but anyway, but I did get to read and internalize all those narratives. But one of the things that, in the way that how, you know, the angle upon which we must approach a story, I didn't really like the way that, because they were told in a very superficial way, you know, it was very like, you know, it was like a lot of tell and not a lot of show, you know. So one of the first things when you take any sort of, if you're going to school for writing, they tell you, you know, show, don't tell. You know, so you want to show, you don't want to say, you know, John walked into the room or with a gun in his hand. You know, you would say something like, you know, the room was dark as the, you know, man approaches the door. He, you know, slowly peels back the first layer of the angle and then gives a head check to make sure the room is, you know, you're showing this person walking into the room. You're not just telling them this dude walks in the room.
Creating that visual story.
Yeah, exactly. But knowing when to break that too, because sometimes you do have to tell, you know. So it's like in Saving, like one of the most famous breaks in that is in Saving Private Ryan, when Tom Hanks's character grabs, Matt Damon's character and he's like, earn this, like that's you're telling the audience what to think in that situation.
Yeah.
That's not showing, that's telling. So, but that's one of the most powerful scenes in the movie. Anyway, so it's kind of one of those things, but yeah, that was kind of how that came about. Wow. That was like how that actually came to be and existed in the world.
Wow, I can see where the passion comes through for you to continue to tell the story of paintball and continue that legacy of what will eventually be history. It's cool to know that it kind of came from that moment with the magazines, though. That's pretty impactful.
Yeah, it's still like charges me up to this day. I'm like, bro,
that's good.
I mean, I know there's probably, other people have those issues and
sure.
It's out there, but it's like, that shit. It's like you're given a watch. I don't mean a watch like there were. You could use that metaphor too, but all of us, while we're alive, are standing watch. Given, you're given watch over a narrative. What do you do at that time? Like, how do you approach that? What did you do with that power? Like other people are sleeping, so it's like the free rider situation. So it's like that park that you enjoy with your kids that you don't pay for, maybe you pay for it with your taxes, but maybe you don't, for whatever reason, but somebody created that. The roads you drive on, this phone that I have, like all these things, like I pay for these things, but some things you don't pay for that you use. And I think about that. It's like, it gives me a certain sort of power in my mind to want to help and create things and caretake things, because I don't want to be a free rider. Like I don't want to be somebody that just enjoys the fruits of other people's labor with no action or no endeavors launched from me, from what I have to give to the world. So like, that's, I think, an important thing.
Yeah. And I hear that a lot from people in paintball who the sport has given them so much in their life that they're now at a stage in their career or in their life where they want to give back to the sport because it's given them so much. Like it's that give and receive, right? Like I've received so much from the sport and now it's my turn to give back in some type of way. Like in Ryan Gray's episode, he talks about potentially doing that sobriety thing at events where he's got a tent and people can make that choice to go in there. That's going to be him giving back to the sport and giving back to people that are coming to the sport to help overcome that. So it's a beautiful thing to hear what you're doing and what other creators are doing too. Good.
No, yeah. It's just, but that's something that, it's like, it does require a certain understanding of the real world and have that serious conversation to know that, again, it's like, the laws that we live under, the money that we have, the religions that we follow, the fact that your parents put in so much, your grandparents and go and so on. And so there's so much effort and work that went into to make you be here right now
in this moment,
with the things that you have to either give to the world. You can give or you can take. Now there's both. You have to take from the world. I have to eat food to live. I got to drink water. I got to go and do certain things. But what do you have to give? And that's also very conducive to like what you're going to like be remembered for. So
that's one of the hardest questions I think people struggle with is, what do you want to be remembered for? And that actually ties me to one of the questions I was going to ask you. Legacy for me is such an important thing. And, it comes from a place of, I've got a loved one in my family who I've looked up to for most of my life. And now that I've done a lot of inner workings and have understood my mind and the world a little bit more, this person says a lot, man, I wish I did this in my life. I wish I had the opportunity when I was younger to do this. I wish I took that chance. And so it's been my mission to live my legacy every single day. And one of the questions I want to start asking on this podcast, and you're giving me the first one, is what do you want your legacy to be? Do you want to be known as the professional paintball player? Do you want to be known as the voice of paintball? Is that even on your scope of what you want to be remembered for?
Oh, man, that's an amazing question. And I don't really think that that's for me to answer, like, that's not like, that's a very, for me to be like, this is exactly what I think I need to be remembered for. Like, that's a bullshit answer to that, to me, like
Sure.
To me, it's about, you give the world things, and then when you're dead, then you are weighed and measured. It's like, what did you do? Like, what did you actually do while you were here? What impact did you have on people's lives?
Yeah.
And so I think that, I mean, I could say, yeah, sure, because like this, I don't know, like I had a big chip on my shoulder when I was a player to be really good, and I tried to, like, when I sit down with the teams that I work with on the divisional side of things, I tell them that there's a difference between a goal and a fantasy. So if you have a goal, then there are very structured, achievable things. So, because I'll sit there and be like, hey, show of hands, who wants to, you guys, all right, hey, thank you guys for coming out. Who wants to win this year? You guys want to win some paintball tournaments? Everyone always puts their hand up, right? Of course, they want. It's the operative verb in that sense. They want to win. And I say, all right, cool. You guys want to win? All right, well, is that a goal or is that a fantasy for you? Because if you actually want to win, then, and it's a goal, that need to be done for you to acquire the skill and experience. Because I'm like, are you winning currently? Oh, you're not winning currently. Okay, well, let's have a serious conversation about this. If it's an actual goal, then there are things that we can do while we're here and not disrespect each other's time in order to try to acquire the skills and the experience needed to achieve that goal. If you are not willing to do those things, that is not a goal, that is a fantasy. Yeah. Okay? And I only want to work with people who actually have goals and not fantasies. Yeah. So as far as legacy is concerned, like, man, I don't, that's not like a, I don't know. It's more of like, it's just you do things and you put things into the world, and then your legacy is decided by future generations. It's like, it's just because like voice of paintball, right? It's like, dude, like I did not give myself that title. Like that's not something that I was like, voice of paintball, guys. Oh, hey, like when we were having this discussion, you're like, hey, do you want to do my podcast? Where I was like, hey, if you could refer to me as the voice of paintball, that would be great. No, like that's not.
It's like a Mr. President kind of thing.
Exactly. Like, fuck that. Like, that's not. No, yeah. It actually kind of like I appreciate it for what it is. You know, like I appreciate it for what it is. It was like you give things to the world, and the world gives you things back, and then it's a symbiotic relationship. Yeah. You give things to the world, you get something back. You give more, you get to a different level. You give more, you get things back, right? Like that's how it works. So that's how I look at that. And not something that I was ever brought up myself, it's something that it's the fruits of a vocation upon which, it's that you're trying to do something for others, because like if you look at, like in my career of playing, I'm out there trying to take scalps. I need to be the best player I can be. I didn't switch teams a ton. I kind of stayed with it. And then when I retired specifically to do this other goal, because I was like, all right, well, I want to be one of the best players in the world. I want to win a world title. I want to play for the Ironman because I was the best team in California at the time. I'm a Californian going way back in my family tree. So I was like, I had a lot of these, things that I wanted to do, right? Travel the world. But once I ticked all those boxes, and then I had these other opportunities present themselves. Now I had a new goal, and the new goal was bigger than me. It was like, all right, let's try to, have a sustainable webcast that we can have like our story at least being there in people's lives that has not been there before on a regular basis. Let me do these other things. And so that was a new goal for me, so, and that goal is still not where I want it to be, because I want that goal to be as big as it possibly can. I want, millions. This, not the people we have now, and I obviously love all the people that support it. My point is that I love this so much. I want it to be the biggest thing it can.
Yeah,
But
I understand that.
yeah, that's what I meant by that. But legacy, it's like, dude, that is just, it's a great question, but I can't sit there and like, you know, question, because that is not
Yeah.
from side. Like, I feel like legacy is not for you to decide. You don't get to write your own tombstone. You know, you don't get to, like, you sure, if you know you're going to die, you can be like, here's what I would like you to, you know, like, hey, tell people this and tell people
Proactively.
that. But like,
Yeah.
you know, as you kind of span it through the generations, the fact that if your name is ever remembered, it's going to be for the efforts that you gave to the world. So it's like, when you look at, like, I just find all this stuff so interesting. So I want other people to know about how cool all this is.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to do my best with whatever I have to, like, lift that, like a rising tide lifts all boats, you know? So that's the thing. But yeah, legacy, dude, like, I mean, I still got a lot of work to do, and that is for future generations to decide. My own legacy is that is not for me to decide. That is fucking 100% up to what I give to the world and how it's weighed and measured on the long term. That's how I look at that.
It's a beautiful answer. And I appreciate you doing that, because that to me, my takeaway from that is you're not done yet, and you still want to keep giving back to the sport and to the world in general. So I do want to ask you two more questions. When I was thinking about bringing you on, when I first started this, it was with goal to obviously have you on my show. And I thought, Matty Marshall, the voice of paintball, and something stuck there. And I was like, wait a minute. I didn't even know, like, is that important to you? And you just talked about it, where you don't get to decide, like, people decide for you.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you when someone says you are the voice of paintball? Like, that has a lot of weight to that.
More stress.
Yeah.
I mean, it's both flattering and also super nerve-wracking. Because, again, I just, you are given the environment, you have your skill set, you have your mindset, and then you push into the world what's possible given those things. So what terms are, what people are called, what titles you get, a lot of that just comes, well, what are you giving to the world? Again, I just believe so firmly that the world needs things. You have a certain unique set of gifts. Everyone's different. Are you a great basketball player? Are you a great, copywriter? Are you a great designer? Are you a great business? Whatever. Like the world has to work. We have to go out into the world, and it has to work. And the better that it works, the more fluid all these systems are, synchronized up, the better all our lives are. Yeah. So, as far as like, I mean, it can see, it's just, it's my reality, but it's also, it's like, don't fuck it up, That's kind of how I look at it. So it's like, you have all these things that are going on, and it's good because it keeps me on my toes, it keeps me dialed, and I just really want to make sure that when those moments hit, that I get a good call on it, that I'm telling the right story. And again, I'm human, I'm going to make mistakes, I'm not perfect, but it's it gives me a lot of strength, and it also gives me anxiety, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the honesty. And, it sounds like, this whole journey of you sharing where you came from anxiety to battling that, to overcoming that is also a tool that you now use for good. And that's also power, because that when you had mentioned, I need something on the line, like I need, whether it's money or I need higher stakes, you're putting anxiety almost on yourself to perform. Right. Yeah. And so it sounds like when you hear the voice of paintball, it creeps in a little bit, but then you're also turning it to something good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a human, dude, like I'm not just this iconoclastic, unmovable creature that, is unflappable. No, that's not the case at all. So it's just, but again, I've developed mechanisms and armor over time through my life experiences and prevailing in these certain situations where I can kind of take that, and it gives me strength, and then to utilize that for the good of the game. I mean, that's how I would describe that. I just try to, it's like a flow of energy. It's like the world gives me energy that pumps me up, helps me conquer my demons. when they arise, and they don't always arise, but when they do, helps me stop that and then continue to focus on my goal, which is to try to elevate the narratives and the moments of the tip of the spear for our sport in order to try to give the consumer, the best experience possible, given what my voice and my personality and my, research and all those different things can kind of bring to bear in those moments.
Yeah, it's how do you channel that and put it into something good. So that totally resonates.
Yeah, because and then it's just it does. In some ways, it's kind of good that it's such a marathon because you don't have a ton of time to sit there and ponder the magnitude of the moment.
Yeah,
because it's like if you're playing, it's harder to do the shows than it is to play because when I was playing, that's like, okay, you get 2 games a day, you got it, but it's a different type of stress because you got to manage all that, get it up, perform, crescendo down, and then get back mentally up, have your game. For our shows, it's just all right, 7:20, all right, hit the button, here we go. All right, hey, welcome to Tampa here, 2025, first event of the year. It is going to get absolutely crazy out here. Can't wait to see how all this is going to go down. First game of the day, and you just get into it and just kind of, and it's like this sing-songy big, personality. It's like I tell the guys that I work with, I'm like, hey, like if they first sit in the seat, I call it the 3 E's. It's energy, enthusiasm, and elaboration. I'm like, imagine that the coolest thing in the world just happened to you, and you are meeting a friend that you haven't seen in a long time. You're meeting him at the bar. You've had a couple drinks, and you're so stoked to tell him the story, and he's in rapture because like this is a really cool thing. Like bring that energy to this, to your flow. Like bring that to type energy. So we got energy, and then we're enthusiastic about it because. As you see, like we're having this conversation. This is a podcast. We're having a conversation, and I'm a pretty loud person, as my wife will remind me, all the time, and pretty excitable. But having a different conversation. But when we're doing a show, to, ratchet up that enthusiasm, and it may seem awkward or fake to you, but you need to be able to use that pliable charisma that you have. Because if you're going to do commentary and you're going to do something in the public eye and you don't have charisma, that is not the job for you.
Oh, they will laugh you off the stage. Yeah,
you just can't. You have to have a certain type of pliable charisma. Pliable meaning, if it's somber, you have to go down and talk about it like this. And if it's up, you got to talk about it like this. Like if you can't do that, then why should anyone listen to you do a show? That's not the job for you. So it's like, so it's energy, enthusiasm, and then we elaborate on things because, I can't just like throw it to whoever I'm with, this is what I'm telling that. So when I throw something to you, it can't be like, what do you think about this? And they're like, yeah, Matty. And then it's crickets, right? It's like, and then I got to pick it back up. Cause again, we got to talk for 10, 12 hours a day, bro. Like I need some help. I need you to help. Like, I need you to fill some air, bro. Like, let's go.
Exactly.
So let's get up that energy. So but you have to stay at that, like you pin that energy to that 10, and you got to try to, it's like, you can't race the whole thing. If you listen to me call finals, like this is why it's kind of tough to do the gig. Cause you really have to kind of like save some for that final, because, it's like when you listen to me call a final, it's at a 10 the whole time. We're talking like this, we're doing this is what's happening. And he's going to make this move. And as he dives into D2, and it's like, but if it's midday and in like a game where it's like a blowout and it's 5-0 and it's an absolute massacre out there, like you have to save a little bit, dude. It would be different if we were just doing like a 2-hour show, because no matter how boring it is, like, okay, I'm going to kick it up and burn out my energy. Like, cause that 2 hours would be like what a baseball game, 3 hours, dude, get out of here, bro. Like that's a piece of cake. 3 hours, dude. I could do 3 hours at a 10, no problem. But if you have to do 30 something hours in 3 days, and at the end you got to be your best, you got to be careful.
Yeah, that's a marathon. Well, we certainly appreciate what you do for the sport. It's amazing. And I will not refer you to as the voice of paintball moving forward, because I don't want to put that anxiety on you.
No. It's like I said, I'm just kidding. It's all good. It's just, it is what it is, dude. Whatever people want to call me, just don't call me Matthew. That drives me crazy when people are like, "What's up, Matthew?" And I'm like, "Bro, is there a cop around? Is my mom
exactly.
here?
Am I in trouble?
Yeah, exactly. Am I in trouble? It's that's a little weird, but it's again, I see it as I appreciate the honor. I wear it, with respect to the gravity of that situation. And yeah, that's fine. I mean, like,
That's awesome.
it is what it is, dude. Like, I appreciate going to the events and getting that type of developed enough. It's like we had to go to, like, AC was the hardest event for me this year because we had to do 4 days. So we had to finish the Texas event. We had to cut a TV show. And so, and then we, I had a new host that was going to be coming on to do the TV show. So it was getting him up to speed. There was and he was great, very professional, but it was a lot, man. It was like, that was a really like difficult weekend to stay at that level the whole time and serve the, cause I really do care. This isn't just some, like, it's not like bullshit. Like, it really means a lot to me that people are willing to pay us money to watch this paintball thing that we do every month, and we need their support. Like, these are people that are, it's like the reason why, like, when you're watching these podcasts and and you're sitting there like, hey, thank you so much to our sponsors, that's not some placating bullshit. That's real stuff. That's
genuine.
Without their support, this doesn't exist. So without the public support, we can't do this. It's not an actual workable business model. I can't keep going to rich guys and being like, give me $500,000 to light on fire. Like that. Those days are not there anymore. And even if they were, that's still not how it should work, because like, it has to stand on its own 2 feet. So the people that do support us, thank you so much. The people that are watching it and they're on their friends' site, logins, like, I thank you for your attention, but can you help us out a little bit, bro?
Yeah,
it's not that
just
much
$10.
money. Like, do you have a job? If you have a job, please give us the $10. I'd really appreciate that. So it's, and again, I'm having a serious conversation with you right now, brother. Like, not you, obviously, but like people out there, like, hey, we need your support, dude. Like, please help us out. So I just kind of this is just our reality. And I'm just so used to kind of working within a very pragmatic, realist situation, because my entire adult life, and even when I was a teenager, like, it's always been very pragmatic and realist. Like, if I wasn't a good paintball player, I couldn't play on those teams. If I wasn't getting better, I couldn't keep tearing up. If we weren't better than the teams that we played against, we weren't going to win that world title. If we didn't have whatever, like, even to the excessive stuff, or even like with, it was cool to see people bring, Heroes for a Day DVDs, like, who has DVD players these days, for me to sign at World Cup in 2025. Like, that's
wild.
It's great. But again, if we're having a serious conversation, well, what does that signify? That signifies that when you tell a good story, it's evergreen content that people will consume as long as that specific thing exists. And so, it's just, I don't know, man. It's just, I've just developed a little bit of a thick skin, because sometimes I try not to read the occasionally, like, oh, just, either they'll be like, I love it that Matty's so black-pilled, or I hate it that Matty's so black-pilled. And I'm like, I'm not black-pilled, dude. Like, I'm I'm all about shooting the moon. But I've also just had to develop a certain amount of pragmatism and realism in order to just get things done.
And, like, you just got to get through it.
Exist. Like, not just get through it, but like make it good, right? With what we have. It's just, you get kind of used to living in that environment where it's like, yeah, dude, this isn't this like, that exist in social media or something where there's like a red pill, black pill, blue, all these different things. It's like, no, bro, like, I don't exist in that environment. The environment that I exist in is that we have to physically go to a location. We have to pull a show off. The show has to be good. We've done that for years. We have to try to give something to the world. Again, you have to give something to the world. They're going to give you something back. Like, and this is just my reality. So, and I appreciate that, like, I really like that. And but the haters, the lovers, all of them in between, it is what it is. I'm just trying to do whatever I can with what we have, to try to give something to the world. Like, cause as you were talking, legacy, and then that's to be determined by future generations. So
it's beautiful. I mean, the gift that you're giving to all of us is incredible. I do have one more question before I let you go, and this is it's a pretty cool thing that I've been doing where I have a guest ask a question for next week's guest without knowing who it is. And so it's a cool way to like kind of tie in every episode. And so the last one I had was from Oliver Lang. And he didn't know that you were going to be on. And then you get to ask a question to my next week's guest. And so his question for you is, if you could restart your life right now and not remember anything you did in your past and money was not an option and you could do something full-heartedly, what would it be?
So, and he did not know that this was...
No, had no idea it was you.
If I could restart my life and money was no option, what would I do? That's the gist of the question.
Yeah. So if you could restart your life and not remember anything that you did in your past, what would you do?
I mean, I don't know. I've tried to live my life just because of the things we've discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Where I try not to have that many regrets. And I really can't imagine. I just can't imagine a life full of more adventure, but it was like kind of also relatively safe. I mean, I just did a podcast with Joe Barrett where like we talked about a lot of, this is why it was kind of really cool to go on his podcast here, but we've discussed completely different things. We haven't really touched much of the same stuff. That was more of like an adventure stories. And it was a very adventurous, tumultuous journey this whole way. Though even now we're just kind of even with that was like kind of just scratching the surface. But I mean, honestly, I feel like the paintball life that I chose is, if I could go back and talk to my same self, I would probably say lean into it the same way. I really don't regret the journey, to be honest. I mean, even though, I could have chosen more lucrative things to do. But as far as understanding the importance of, it's like, and I've said this on his podcast and I've said this on a lot before, and I've used this I've officiated like 20 weddings, and it's like a thing that I put in so if you're officiating a wedding, steal this. But I say, if it's true that when you die, your life flashes before your eyes, then the last story you're ever going to hear or see is your story. So you should probably make it a good one.
Wow.
And then when I do a wedding, I'm like, and this is what we're doing right now. We're turning a good story into a great story by joining these two lives into one. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really, honestly, another thing too, I feel like I would be doing my younger self a great detriment if I gave him too much insight. Like if I told him too many tricks of the trade or too much stuff, then like, I don't know. I think the one thing, and this is going to be slightly controversial, but I mean, I feel like I would probably tell my younger self to be a little bit more selfish. I know it's going to sound a little weird, but I was very much always the team guy, and sometimes that would come back and bite me a little bit,
Sure.
And so I think just being wary about your place in the environment that you're in, and your value and what you have to give to that. Be wary of that, because that would be the only thing that I would change, is that I would just kind of try to be, a sergeant or a lieutenant when the captain was this or that. And sometimes it wasn't always the right decision. So I think I probably would have held the line a little bit in things looking back. But honestly, and again, that, people may be like, well, why would you tell your younger version to be more selfish? But if you're innately somebody that wants to work within a system, like, you do need to think about yourself sometimes. And,
for sure.
and I didn't ever take any of the offers that were, that people were given to me. And anyway, so, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, that was, I'm not trying to give my younger self cheat codes to steal away from my soul the hard-earned lessons that I had to learn. So Yeah.
I think it's when what you would tell yourself is beautiful. You're telling yourself, hey, enjoy it more. Like, be more selfish. Like, take that extra slice of pizza or whatever it is. Don't, that's okay.
Don't be a dick about it. Don't be a dick about it. But like, stand up for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's beautiful. So, and then last thing is you get to ask a question for next week's guest without knowing who it is.
Oliver's question was really good. Man. Yeah, this is a tough one because there's so many different ways to go with this. And this is something I really wish, this is the analysis paralysis situation.
Yeah. Here, I'll give you a few. So Sal Chavez from BFP Gear and Dynasty's media guy, he went completely left field and he asked, is cereal a super chowder? Ryan Gray asked, I think his was, if you could have dinner with a previous deceased loved one, who would it be and why? It's like the questions have been literally all over the place, which is great.
Okay. Then I guess because there's so many different ways. There's like practical and philosophical to go with this. I think that one would be interesting to know what somebody would think about is that if you could take any historical figure to play paintball, who would it be?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Wow.
Any historical figure, any of them. And who would it be? And you get to be with them the whole time. Like you're with them, you take them through the day, you're playing alongside them. Maybe even at a big game, maybe it's like you could take them to play multiple different styles of paintball at the same time. But like if you could take any historical any historical person, live or dead, to play paintball, who would it be?
Wow. Oh man, that's such a good question. That's the perfect way to end the show. So man, thank you so much for coming on the show. I certainly appreciate it. And you're going to have to tune in next week to see who the next guest is and how he answers that question.
Well, dude, thank you so much for your time. And I appreciate you again, you throwing your hat into the ring here because you're perfect for this. This was a great experience. And yeah, it just, it's one of those things. It's, when people are like, well, what should we do? And I'm like, well, here's what I think we should do. But like, if you have another idea, I'm all for it. We're going this way. It's, let's, like I always joke. I always joke where I'm like, hey, dude, we're in the jungle and here's a dim torch and a dull machete. I think we're going this way. But if you think we need to go that way, then you start carving it out that way. So when people show up and start doing cool storytelling stuff like this, I'm like, good job, bro.
I appreciate that. That means a lot to me coming from you. So thank you so much for that. So to everyone else tuning in, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of the Shellda Podcast, and we'll see you next time.